What we're going to do tonight, besides talking about Carse and his values and his sensibilities, is this is so Carse McDaniel, we're going to have a little concert. Yeah. And my friend Sandy will introduce the musicians, and also some people couldn't make it, so somebody sent a poem that she wrote for Carse. And somebody sent a letter that we're going to read part of it. It was a bit long. Carse was into brevity. He's going to have a hard time with me. And then anybody will be invited up to say a few words about Carse a little bit later, but that will be announced. And there will be more music at the end. We're going to start with music, kind of end with music, and then an announcement, and then enjoy yourselves. And welcome.
All right, it is my pleasure to introduce Jacqueline Zander Wall. That's right. She's a mezzo-soprano and an artistic founder and director of the Vocal Artistry Art Song Festival of New Mexico. And also James Harder, the pianist. And currently a vocal coach at the University of New Mexico. Newly relocated from New York City to Albuquerque. So welcome. They're going to do about 6 pieces of some of Carse's favorite songs. Oh, 3 pieces of Carse's.
just a word about the Brahms intermezzo. At the top of the manuscript, Brahms has quoted in German a Scottish folk song. And the line from the folk song says, "Slumber peacefully, my child. Sleep peacefully and beautifully. It saddens me when you cry."
That was truly beautiful. Interesting. Carse was Scots-Irish, so I love the fact that there was Scottish, something Scottish in there. We're going to hear more music a little bit later on, but we're going to get started with a quote from a rabbi from Petaluma, Rabbi David Bush.
And this was sent from a friend of Rainey Carse's, Isabel Auerbach. And it goes, "The truth is that when we grieve and mourn, it's not just sadness and loss, it's a deep appreciation and connection to the essence of that person and what they represented to you. It's unlocking the deep value, being inspired by everything they stood for, cherishing their memory, yearning to hold them close once again, and committing to perpetuate their life through yours. You can never lose one whom you have loved."
Thanks, Sandy. I'll just start. I've got these big notes up here. They're written in these really big pens. It doesn't mean I'm going to see them easily, so please forgive me. I've never aspired to be much of a speaker. But I want to talk about Carse now, and then eventually invite others to do so as well. For those of you who have known Carse well, and even some of you who haven't known him well, we were all aware that he had some absolutely wonderful qualities, endearing qualities. And so I'm going to talk about some of those. A lot of paper here. Carse was a very humble person. He never bragged, unless he got the Sunday New York Times puzzle done in just a matter of hours. He finished it every Sunday. He was well organized. He was voted the neatest person in his class in his high school in a small town of Ellenboro, North Carolina. And I'm going to back up a little bit just to give you, I think, things that you may already know. He grew up in a small farm just outside of a very small town in Ellenboro, North Carolina. And he was very thrifty. He was never frivolous, but he would say to people, if you want it, you must need it. He had impeccable manners. I was always amazed. Maybe that's part of Southern gentlemanliness and gentlewomen. He was very good with his, oh my gosh, he was so polite. He was very even-keeled, which I very much appreciated. Carse just had such an even temper and a really gentle demeanor. He was also extremely accepting of people. If there were any run-ins with people or disagreements, he just absolutely accepted. He had this very Buddhist quality. After he died, I noticed there was in his library, which was quite extensive, a whole wall of books. He had this large section on Buddhism. And my hunch is he read quite a few of them. He was very loving. In one of his journals that I had the pleasure to read, he talked about his love for his mother. Every time I read it, I was in tears. It was just so beautiful how much he loved her. But it wasn't just his mother. He had two wonderful sisters, Rosa and Maxine. I unfortunately didn't get to meet Rosa because she died before Carse and I got together. But his sister Maxine and he were so close, I would often listen to them talking on the phone. Not listening in, but I knew that there was so much love there and so much care. And what I really admired was that in many ways they were polar opposites in terms of religion and politics, and I just so admired that Carse looked at the spirit of a person. The rest was just, ego or whatever it was. He always looked to the spirit of a person. He loved his classmates, and they obviously loved him. And most of them were not able to be supportive of GLBT folks, and were extremely conservative, and it was always a pleasure for me to go to his reunions, just to watch how much people loved Carse and how great he was with his classmates. He was a very kind person. Well, Carse was not religious at all. He absolutely believed that kindness was a debt you owed every single person you encountered. He wasn't so great with dogs, but hey. He was incredibly generous. He inherited a lot of money in 1992, and since then, ever since I've been with him, I noticed a lot of his friends are people of much less means, like he was. As he grew up, he was a person of less means, and he would always cover costs of dinners, meals out. He was so generous with his friends, and I watched that, and it was impressive. There is a man in our neighborhood, he's homeless, and he's actually a very sweet guy. We love him, but I just noticed when he would knock on the door, I would sometimes try to hide. And Carse would go to the door, and invariably, every time he handed him our phone, I would carefully wash it after each use. and he would give him $5 or $10 or whatever this guy asked for. And when when I told him that Carse had passed, he started crying. This homeless guy. Fortunately, he still comes and knocks on the door. He hasn't ruled me out. He was just a very compassionate person. He knew many people who struggled, and it was just such a joy for me to watch him with his tremendous compassion, acceptance, and just treating them as a really decent, with a lot of decency and respect. That was Carse. I'm trying not to miss any of these, but it's hard to see. Carse, as many people know, he is very smart. He was put in 1963 as who's who in American colleges and universities. He was always at the top of his class. One of his classmates was telling me that when they had the 4th grade standardized testing, I think we all took that at some point, she said she was astonished that he rated in the 11th grade in reading comprehension. She said nobody else in our class came close. She said our class was a good class. We were all smart, but not quite that smart. As I mentioned, he did the crosswords every Sunday. What really was hard for me was I do a New York Times Sunday thing. It's called Spell and Bee. You get 7 letters. It's a game. And you get 3 points for a word that uses all the letters. So I'm sitting on my side of the table with this list. He looks across the table at the lettering, which is upside down, and says, I got it. It might take me a day later to get it. Carse, he was just really gifted. Many people know that he was a lifelong librarian, and he was the head of the art and music department at the Civic Center Library in San Francisco. And I'm sure it was great to ask him for help. I'm sure he was really good. I didn't know him until he had retired, so I didn't get that opportunity. He was very thoughtful, and I want to thank my sister Kiki for reminding me of the word quietude, because that was so Carse. In a given room, we all take up space. Some of us take up more than others. Carse didn't take up much space, but you always knew he was in that room. And I think it was, his being so even-keeled and so respectful. It was great to see him in that room. When we first moved to our home in Albuquerque, there's a big glass sliding door, and I would occasionally run into it because I was, at that time, just legally blind in one eye, but I still did it. We also noticed the birds would run into the other side, and I came home one day, and there he was lettering the Chinese script for happiness in gold paint on the door so that I and the birds wouldn't knock into it. It peeled off very quickly because New Mexico heat. That doesn't work, but then he put up a mandala and taped it up. And 3 days before he died, my brother was there, Sandy was there, a number of folks were there, and Carse knew that Andriana, a friend of ours, was coming over, and he heard that she was coming to dinner, and he put his head up and said, "Do we have enough wine in the house?" Now, Andriana's not a lush, don't get me wrong. Some people like a glass of wine with their meals, and I just thought, wow, Carse, holy smokes. He was also proud. I don't know if Herb Lotz is here or not, if he made it. He was coming down from Santa Fe, but he's a wonderful New Mexico photographer. And he went out to San Francisco, went to Harvey Milk's apartment, and took these naked photos of Harvey Milk and his partner Scott. So Herb gave one to Carse, and Carse put it up on the wall in our kitchen, and I was thinking, oh God, what if my parents see me? Oh, that's right, my parents are dead. But, what if there's lesbian women or people who just don't want to see that? Well, it was very wrong. He was unashamed, and I will not take it down. It's still up there. And just a month or so ago, this woman came, lesbian woman. She said, oh my God, that's Harvey Milk. I love this photo. I'm so glad to be wrong about things. He was also very clever. When we first bought our house, we absolutely loved the house, but to me it looked like a lot of driveway and garage was like the focal point of it. And I mentioned that to Carse, and the next day he came inside and he said, Ray, I went outside and did some measuring, and I bet if we were to rip out 3 feet of concrete in the very middle, we could put trees and bushes there. I called the concrete removal company right away. I can't read my writing. He also wanted to be able to look at the sunsets, and he wanted a room on top of the house, but then he thought, no, that's silly, we don't need the extra space. He thought of doing a platform that was easily removable if we needed to replace the roof. And today we have this beautiful staircase that goes up to our roof with this wonderful platform with 2 chairs and a table, and we go up there and have a glass of wine and watch the sunset. And I never, ever would have thought of this. He was also, Carse did a lot of volunteer work. He volunteered for an organization called Maitri in San Francisco after the AIDS crisis happened. and it was working in a house that Maitri somehow got. Maitri was started by Isan Dorsey. Some of you might know who that is, or not. Buddhist monk in San Francisco, and Carse volunteered there for many years. They worked with indigent and low-income folks who had no place to go to just prepare for death in the kindest way possible. Carse volunteered there from 1992 until he left San Francisco in 1998. He also worked for Food for Thought, which was an AIDS and cancer food bank in Sonoma County for almost 10 years. For every year he lived up in Sonoma County. When he moved here, he volunteered for the New Mexico Commission on the Blind, and I'm guessing that had something to do with me. He was just so kind. He was also curious, and anybody who knows Carse knows that he loves books. He read all the time. He loved to travel. He was finally able to say one day that he'd been to all 50 states. He was really proud of that. And of course, he and I took a number of trips, places I wouldn't have thought of to go, St. Petersburg, and in Russia, and a number of other places. What he did when we went to a town was he listed all the museums. And it was kind of on the run sometimes. We had 30 minutes at this museum. We had only 15 minutes to get from that museum to the next. We could have 45 minutes of that one. I did love it. But wow, he did not want to miss his museums. And his personal loves, Carse was always a biker from the time he was a young kid, and he joined Lavender Bike Club in San Francisco. He biked all the time. He also, many of you know that he loves swimming. I think one of his swimming buddies is here, Maria. And he would, towards the end of his life, he swam a mile a day, 5 days a week. For 80 years old, that's pretty amazing, I think. He also absolutely loved opera. Oh my God. When I looked through his library, there were opera playbooks from early 1970s on, and there were like hundreds. And I had not gone to more than one opera until I met Carse. Now I've been to, many. But at first I thought they were expensive way to nap. But I got into it, started getting a little bit. He was a big opera buck, and I just wondered, how do you go from a farm boy from North Carolina to, I grew up in a very small town in North Dakota, and we didn't have a lot of cultural amenities. We just didn't know. We had country western radio. We had, school plays. And Carse, he loved opera. He loved classical music. He went to concerts, San Francisco Symphony often, and the opera. And I want to thank you all for coming here. I also have a list of people to thank when I find it. I'll let you know. There's so many people to thank for making this happen. I want to thank right now, however, Jackie Zanderwall for making me cry as I walked up here. James Harder on the piano, absolutely exquisite. And there will be more music. So I'm going to hand this over. I think, if I'm right, there is a poem that was written by a local poet named Joanne Bowden. Doris?
I'm always so humbled when I think about Carse, but to hear all this all together is a bit overwhelming. I'm nothing like as brilliant as Carse was. Just the most calming person and always so caring whenever I came into their house. And he's still there every time I walk in. Our friend, Joanne Bowden, who I knew 25 years ago from growing orchids. She's a retired educator and an award-winning novelist and poet with numerous literary awards for her publications. Wrote a special poem for Carse. Her awards are just numerous for the things she wrote, like two very well-known novels locally, Walking Fish and Orchid of the Night, and also a book of poetry called Piggybacked. Anyway, Joanne could not join us today, and I am very honored to stand in Joanne's place to read her poem for Carse to you. Waltz in the Mist for Carse McDaniel. White mist undulates in evening breezes while time stands still. Another soul journeys towards eternity, swaying slowly in waltz time. Glimmering brightly at first, it ascends toward night sky in symphonic variations only heard by those who choose contemplation. An avid reader of books, a librarian, a world traveler, an opera aficionado, an AIDS activist, a loving partner, a seeker of truth, an activist, an athlete, a force of nature who will be missed. Yet his journey has just begun. Now, the mist disappears and the scent of desert sage and roasting chili permeates New Mexico's air. Honey locust trees begin to drop their pods, while fall colors of aspen and maple trees beckon artists to capture their beauty. Soon, balloons will fill the sky in celebration of Albuquerque's 50th year anniversary of International Balloon Fiesta. Dots of color floating in an ocean of air so breathtaking that silence overtakes the spectators on the field. Seasonal changes, reminders of our impermanence, of our brief time on earth, and of our inevitable journey toward the infinite.
Thank you, Doris. And thank you, Joanne. I think the next thing that we're going to do, since I can't read my notes anymore, is the letter from Paul Turner, a close friend of Carse's from San Francisco.
Memories of Carse from Paul Turner. When Rain called me and gave me the sad news of Carse's death, I began recalling details of my longtime friendship with him over nearly 50 years. I first got to know Carse in 1974. I had recently bought my house on 16th Street in San Francisco neighborhood that was just beginning to become gay and to be called the Castro. I met Carse and his partner Matt Bowman, who lived across the street from me, and his friends Dick Wagner and Ken Schertz. I immediately liked both Matt and Carse, but I think I felt a special affinity with Carse, with his thoughtfulness, his modesty, and his calmness that always seemed to put people at ease. I began spending time with Matt and Carse at their apartment in the heart of the Castro. Harvey Milk had recently opened his camera store on Castro Street and had begun his unorthodox political career, and both Carse and I got to know him and helped him in his campaigns for San Francisco supervisor. In 1979, I met my partner Michael, and whenever Michael and I went to the San Francisco Public Library, we would first go up to the art and music department on the 3rd floor to find Carse and chat with him. Carse must have been completely preoccupied with Matt's condition during this period, because I don't remember ever visiting them there at their apartment, and I assume that's where Matt died in 1992. In the mid-1990s, Carse moved to Forestville in Sonoma County, north of San Francisco, to a house on a large piece of land outside town. Michael and I enjoyed visiting him there, and I especially remember the pleasure he took in showing us the vegetable gardens he had created, growing tomatoes, beans, and squash. On one of our visits, Carse took us to lunch in Forestville and introduced us to Rain, whom he had been telling us about. It was immediately clear to us how happy the two of them were together. When Carse and Rain moved to Albuquerque in 2006, they kindly invited me to visit them there, which I did, first in July of 2007. It was wonderful getting to know Rain better and to spend an extended time with both of them. But I seem to remember especially the meals we had at home, such as the breakfast in their garden under the grape arbor. At one point, I snapped a photo of the two of them across the table from me. They both looked serenely happy. This is the way I'll always remember Carse. And that photo is on the board. So Rain, is this the time when anybody who wants to come up and say anything about wonderful Carse?
My name is Roy Hamrick. I'm here with my partner, Stephen from Seattle. And like in Paul's letter, I've known Carse for almost 50 years now, and first met Matt in San Francisco in 1973, and shortly after that met Carse. So there, I know that this is just lovely, right? This is just beautiful. I know Carse would just love it, and I think that he really, I regret that he's not here, but the fact is I know that he's here in my heart, and I think probably in the hearts of all of us here today. So there are two stories I have to tell. You said so much about Carse and you captured him, but there are two things that I want to talk about. The first one, Matt died, and as Paul said in his letter, in 1992, and at that time it was assumed with the AIDS crisis that Carse just assumed it was a short matter of time before he would pass away. I remember him calling me. I was in my office in Seattle in the mid-90s, and he Well, then he told me he wasn't, his health wasn't deteriorated and he wasn't going to die. So there were tears of joy in my face at that time, but it was also hard for him because he sort of assumed that it was on the way out and he had to figure out he was going to have to start to live again. So he did. He moved up to Forestville and visited him there. And I was very happy that visiting him there, and he told me that he had a new boyfriend, a very handsome boyfriend, and he showed me a photograph, and the photograph was entitled "Nude Descending a Staircase." I looked at it, indeed, it was very handsome. And that was indeed Ren. I looked over here, Ren, and I didn't see the photograph here. So, maybe we can sort of put that up. The only thing that I can add here is just the word, you said everything so much, so gracious. And that's what I think of Carse and Ren. How gracious you are. We visited many times here in Albuquerque. We had Carse visit us in Seattle, and if there's one thing that Carse taught me, I think, is how to live, and really, he knew how to live well, and what a treat, so that he was certainly part, and you, Ren, are part of our lives. So, thank you. Give the microphone over to others who maybe want to give their story. Don't be shy.
I don't know where to begin. My name is Ron Walker. I'm married to Susan. This is the niece of Carse. And what I remember most about Carse, he was very accepting. And what most, I think, people didn't, I know everybody in this room knew about him. He loved people, didn't boast, had a heart of gold. And we always loved when Carse and Rain came up. The thing about Carse, he would come up to visit us and he would tell us where we were going. He always had his itinerary. He said, well, have you eaten there? And we'd say, we didn't even know that a restaurant existed. So he was very versed in, when he went to visit people, he would know everything about the town. And that's something that we all missed and loved about him. There was one evening, we went to a restaurant that Carse had wanted us to go to. And Rain, maybe you remember, it was on 15th Street, Cherry Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And we went in and we ate. I always ask Carse, what do you think I should drink with this? And he would always come back. He says, well, I think, Ron, you need to try the white wine. And I always say, I don't like white wine, but I'll try it. But he was right, as usual. And it was near the end of the dinner. We were going to have dessert. And I was going to share I got a piece of cake, and I was going to share it with the people at the table. Well, unfortunately, I couldn't do that because the cake was only 1 by 1. And I looked at it in dismay, and I said, they charge $15 for a cupcake. So I took one bite and tried to pass it around, but it wasn't enough to pass it around the table. But I was intrigued by Carse because he was, as it was said before, he was very smart. He never, ever belittled anybody. And if Carse didn't agree with you, what I liked about him, he would always go, well, let's look at this. He always kind of say that, so you know he was thinking about it. But not in a way to demean the person, but to have the person look at it in another aspect. I was very taken with Carse, and me and my wife Susan, we did a little research on Carse. Not only was he intelligent, just like Oren said, he was voted, one year he was voted the top 100 student in his class, in the whole United States. So I thought that was very interesting. But Carse was one of a kind. He will be missed, but he will be here forevermore. So we're not here. We should celebrate his life because he touched everyone in this room. And thank you.
Anybody else? This is Carse's niece, Susan.
Hello. First of all, I've heard about his friends for years and how close-knit all of you were for so long. I can't imagine how nice that would be to have this many friends and more. I remember Matt, but not that well. So basically, I remember Rain for most of their lives together. And Rain has so many of the same qualities, so many of them. I love you. When I was a young kid, Carse came and lived with us in Greensburg, North Carolina. And he was a teacher at a brand new school, Page High School, for a while, and it ended up being what I graduated from, and then my son graduated from years later. I'm sorry, I'm real lost, but I probably couldn't have made it where I did and done the things I have done or haven't done without Carse. He was, especially after my mother died, he would listen to me for an hour or so talking about memories when I know he really probably wanted to go to something else, but he would still listen until it was time to go swimming or take Rain somewhere. But so as a child, I was very blessed to have him in my life.
New Mexico now is partly because we spent so many times traveling all over New Mexico with Rain and Carse. And we saw more of New Mexico than any other state in the Union because we loved it. Carse had plans for us to ride trains. He had plans for us to go to incredible places in Arizona as well as New Mexico. And it was such a delight. However, not always. I just want to say that in my mind, watching Carse, he suffered no fools. But beyond suffering no fools, and you could kind of see his opinions were clear, he never took it out on any of those fools. I will remember a time when we were down at Inn of the Mountain Gods, and it's the one time I was kind of pissed. I think it's the only time I was kind of pissed. I really wanted to drive. Well, Carse only believed in driving the speed limit, and I didn't. And it was his car. He did not let me drive. So, but he never took it out on me. And my wife and I moved here 2.5 years ago. I do this. We moved to Las Cruces, which is about a 3.5-hour drive from here. And I am so grateful that Carse drove down with Rain to see our new digs and visit us. where we were at, I am immensely grateful. I am also immensely grateful that I got to help take care of him last year.
Okay, my name's Warren. I met Carse sometime in the 90s, because both of us worked at the San Francisco Public Library. And we became friends, and just like some of you, you traveled with Carse. So he and I traveled in the United States, well, mostly in California and also in Europe. So in October 2008, Carse, Rain, and I were traveling in France, and we were in Avignon. So this was very pleasant. It was one evening, we had come from a restaurant, we were properly wined, and I think Rain went back to where we were staying. So Carse and I were walking around Avignon, properly wined, and it began raining, but not hard, soft. So Carse immediately began singing rain songs. And I think the first one, the one that I remember is it was soon it's gonna rain, soon it's gonna rain, I can hear it, soon it's gonna rain, I can tell. So he finished that, and then I responded with something. His itinerary, not itinerary, but his list of rain songs was much longer than mine. So here, the two of us are singing these rain songs, walking through the streets of Avignon one evening in the rain.
Anybody else?
Right here. Right. It's a good thing I've had a glass of wine, otherwise I don't think I would have had the courage to stand up. But I met Carse through Rain. At the time I was working at the fitness center for the city of Albuquerque, and Rain and his friend Bob came in, and I was the one who was showing them the equipment. Anyhow, to cut a very long, boring story short, shortly thereafter, because I was invited to Rain's house, and I met Carse, well, shyer, more held back. And I'm loud and obnoxious, make a lot of noise, and Rain understood me and laughed with me. So my first impression was, oh, he doesn't like me. And I love Rain, and I can't bear it if his partner, is not going to like me because of our friendship. And as it turned out, he was just more discriminating about who he was going to hang out with. And I was very lucky that he ended up liking me. I hope he liked me. Well, if he didn't, he put on very good act. But he did, and I loved him dearly. And really, all I want to say is, I miss him. I miss him dreadfully. And I know that when my time comes, I'm going to see him again. I really truly believe that. And there's so many stories, and I don't want to go into it because I'll cry. But thank you.
I'm Lucy McMahon from formerly of Petaluma, where we met both Rain and Carse, who were wonderful guests when we always had our parties on Keokuk Street. And they were actually our role models for retirement because we were a little bit younger behind them, and they decided they would relocate to a different region of the country. We couldn't even imagine leaving Sonoma County. We were just so entrenched in it, but we saw them go. We saw another couple go up to Canada. And so we decided, yes, we could sell the house and move. So we moved to Connecticut, my home state. But we left a lot of love in California, so we would commute between Petaluma, Sonoma County, and Connecticut once a year, and we drove because we had a little dog. And so when we routed ourselves in the winter, it was always in the south on 40. So we got to be regular drop-ins with Carse and Rain, and it was fun. It was a nice haven off the freeway. And one time I said, "You better let them know we're coming," because I didn't tell them when we were left at California. So I said, I'll text them. I had Rain and Carse's phone numbers in my cell. But I wasn't real good at texting it. I had just gotten it. So I didn't know you'd identified yourself. You know, I thought, I have his number, he should have mine, I know who I am. And so I just said, "Can we stop by? We're on our way home. Can we stop by for a few minutes and say hi?" And so I got a text back saying, "Sure." And so we are looking forward to seeing them. And we find out when Carse opened the door that he didn't know who had sent the text. And he just, "Oh, it's you." Well, yes, it's me, and it's us, actually. And so then we had a nice visit with Carse all by himself, who had put out lovely hors d'oeuvres on little mid-century plates and did everything Rain would have done if had he been there, but he was at an art show. And so we had a lovely two-on-one visit with Carse there. And very gracious and certainly not afraid to open the door and find out who was ringing his bell. And so we really will miss him. And it's good to be back in Albuquerque. You know, it's just, we felt like home. We know where to go to the Whole Foods, and we know where you live, and we know all the streets that we've been on many times. So, thank you.
I'm Maria, and I want to share a swim story. So I met Carse before I've known Rain. Anyways, here in Albuquerque, Carse and I are swimming. And lo and behold, the car keys get stolen and all his clothes. And so we call the police, and Carse has his towel around him. And we're in the back of the police car. And I said, "Carse, check out the police officer." And so we get over to their house, knock, knock, knock. Rain answers the door and says, "Carse?" You know, and we're looking at each other, looking at the police officer going,
When we're done with this, we'll go back to some more music. But is there anybody else that would like to share a few words about their experiences with Carse?
Thank you. One thing that I haven't heard yet was what a great sense of humor Carse had. It was a dry sense of humor. It wasn't like he was a jokester or anything, but he would always sort of have that mischievous raise of the eyebrow. And then he would come out with some witticism, some one-liner that was just so perfect and so appropriate. The story that I wanted to share was when Carse and I got to be spouses together when we went to Wapaton, North Dakota, to Rain and Tom's 40th reunion. Now, we didn't know anybody really from Wapaton other than family members, and we watched Rain and Tom just have the time of
their lives. They were just reminiscing and just so wonderful. The food was terrible. The wine wasn't particularly good. There was, so Carse and I were like kind of in the corner, sort of commiserating with one another. And we both sort of silently agreed that we were never going to do this again. But that's what I loved about him, because he made, being a spouse a little less painful, because at least we had each other. But in all the trips that we took, I sort of agree with Tom. He had an itinerary, and it was extensive. I mean, you had to keep on time and to make all these places or whatever, so it could be a little bit exhausting. But he did know exactly where to go, and he had the history behind it, and the conversations in the car would always be really entertaining, and it was like a history lesson, really. But he was a man of integrity. You always knew that he was kind of a stand-up guy. You knew exactly who you were with, and I do appreciate that. But I also want to say that Rain shares a lot of some of those qualities in the kindness and acceptance and love that they share. So they were a really special couple, and I'm grateful that I had the little time that I did getting to know Carse.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I would like to thank some people who've been so very helpful, not only with getting this set up, but also with Carse's burial site. And I also want to tell you just a little bit more about Carse. He was very political in his own way, but he did not argue politics with people. He had been a vegetarian since his early 30s, and in his will, he wrote down he wanted to be buried in a natural burial ground in a shroud. For most people I think prefer maybe to be cremated, but he had heard that it was more ecological to be buried in one of these new natural burial grounds. So Sandy, who was staying with us, she and I had to get right on it and find one. We did find one. It was outside of Belen, an hour away from where we live, on a very rocky road, but actually kind of very desolately beautiful, with many trains going by, which was a thrill because Carse loved trains. And so he's buried in a shroud. It was interesting. I thought the shroud was beautiful. I asked the guy who ran the burial ground where he got them. Turned out an old friend of mine was making them in San Francisco. So this is a lot of synchronicities. At this point, I want to tell you that we're going out to that burial ground tomorrow at 10 o'clock. We're meeting at our house and doing a sort of caravan. Now, anybody can actually go out there. Those who are good at GPS, you just put in La Puerta Natural Burial Ground, NM, New Mexico, and it will take you right out there, the direction. Their GPS is great. At this point, I want to thank a number of people. I want to thank Kiki and Tom, my sister and brother, for amazing amount of support, proofreading and advice, and just being so helpful through all of this last year. I want to thank Art Krause for lots and lots of car rides and help getting to the printers. I want to thank Adrian Citron, who is not here, but who made that beautiful accordion card of Carse full of the photographs. There's some more here. I think I mailed one to probably all of you, but it was a really beautiful job. I want to thank Sandy very much, who was here when it was hard, and who has helped so much with all of this. I want to thank Jan Smith for being so supportive and helpful. Marla Slobin, who's also here, who has been incredibly helpful in the last year. I want to thank my son Damian Norby, who helped so much out of the burial ground, and just for his general support and humor that kept me from falling into the hole. I also want to thank you, Jackie Sanderwall and James Harder, for exquisite music and for making me cry on the way up here. I want to thank you, Dorsen, for reading Joanne Bowden's beautiful poem. I want to thank Joanne as well, and Shelley Berman for incredible help at the burial ground. And Isabel Arbach for sending that quote and just being incredibly supportive. Maria Abadesco for welcoming people today. Jim Van Buskirk for putting Carse on caringbridge.com. If any of you aren't aware of it, you can go to caringbridge.com. You can put in Carse's name and you can kind of find the whole story from about a year ago. And I want to thank all of you for attending. And this is very Carse 2. We're going to have more music. A memorial service without a concert would not be Carse. And we're going to have a toast to Carse. And I want to thank Carse for all that he has given all of us. Thank you again. We're going to have more music, and I think we're going to have a toast very soon. Thank you.
Prelude, which is entitled Camel. I thought it was a curious selection until I began to research a bit and discovered that count of funerary urns which were buried with the mummies in Egypt. So.
Thank you, Jackie and James. Absolutely beautiful. For those of you who want to know what words were being sung, they're all in your program. So, how about a toast? To a life well lived and all of what he left behind for all of us.